Indeed, it was exactly as such. The moment Wang Lin charged within 100 feet of the blood dragon's body, the void once again descended into darkness. However, this darkness was destined to be different from the previous few. This time, it would mark the first time Wang Lin would be the focal point of the black-clad elder's attention. All of this was because of Wang Lin. The darkness that enveloped the void was something Wang Lin had come to understand after the previous encounters. This realization was unrelated to his cultivation, but rather came from his Twilight Divine ability. The Twilight Divine ability contained a trace of primordial force. Primordial force was the essence of all light in the universe, and under its illumination, all darkness would dissipate. Yet, in this world, everything existed relative to one another. With the primordial law, naturally, there was also the law of dusk. This night was the manifestation of the law of dusk. As the void and darkness descended, Wang Lin, for the first time, did not feel the usual dawn of primordial force flooding his body. Instead, he forced his Twilight Divine ability into motion with his cultivation, not to kill, but merely to survive in this darkness. In this eternal, lightless void, a light appeared for the first and only time. It was faint, like the early sun, seemingly insignificant in the surrounding dark, but it had appeared nonetheless. Within this light, Wang Lin felt as if his entire body was burning. His primordial energy was ablaze, his divine sense was on fire, and even his stone-like body was consumed in flames. In this inferno, he broke through the darkness ahead, covering a distance of 100 feet, entering the blood dragon's body where the wound showed shock. At the moment Wang Lin entered the wound of the blood dragon, he disregarded the burning of his body from the Twilight Divine ability, and with a single wave of his right hand, a large portion of the blood dragon's blood crystals vanished without a trace, absorbed into his storage dimension. His face revealed wild joy, yet there was also regret. He hadn't expected to obtain the ancient god's heart's blood here. After all, with his true understanding of the ancient god ruins, he knew that all the heart's blood within the ancient god's body had already been taken by Tua Senator. Taking the heart's blood from Tua Sen was nearly impossible. Gaining the heart's blood was the source of his joy, but at the same time, to acquire it, he had to forego observing Tua Sen's power, and that was his regret. With joy and regret in his heart, Wang Lin, just as the darkness of the void began to fade, felt his divine sense burning out, on the verge of collapse, as though he would die once again. After all, forcibly activating the Twilight Divine ability with his current cultivation was too much to bear. But in that instant, the black-clad elder, who had noticed the sudden glow in the distant darkness, looked at Wang Lin with an expression of strange realization. What had puzzled him in his mind seemed to click, much like the sudden appearance of that light in the darkness. He took a step forward, and in the moment the void darkness disappeared, he appeared beside the blood dragon. With a casual wave of his right hand, the blood dragon's body trembled violently, roaring as it retreated rapidly. A rumbling sound came from within, as if it were about to collapse. Wang Lin's body, as it blurred in front of the elder, was caught in the elder's right hand, and flew out of the blood dragon's body, landing before the elder. The elder's right hand directly pressed onto Wang Lin's forehead, and an unimaginable, boundless power surged into Wang Lin's body. With a series of resounding thuds, Wang Lin suddenly became clear-headed, his depleted primordial energy replenished in an instant. His dissipating divine sense also reformed in a miraculous, defiant manner, and even his burning body, which seemed on the verge of shattering, regained vitality as though time had reversed. All of this occurred in the blink of an eye. Not bad, young man. The black-clad elder glanced at Wang Lin, a hint of admiration in his eyes. Quite clever. Since you've come here with a split body to see the dark ancient god, I shall grant your wish. Wang Lin's mind was shaken. To have his thoughts so easily spoken aloud caused his pupils to shrink instantly, though he quickly regained his composure. The elder's eyes showed even more appreciation, but he no longer looked at Wang Lin, nor at the blood dragon, which was now retreating in increasing turmoil, but instead, he pointed toward the sky's swirling vortex. Just a single point, but in Wang Lin's eyes, it seemed as though this one finger could tear the very heavens apart. His mind briefly flashed back to the time in Luo Tian's star domain when this same elder's single punch had shattered the spatial barrier between Luo Tian and the Alliance, causing an earth-shattering collapse. The vortex in the sky froze suddenly. With the elder's finger, it no longer spun but slowly began to unravel, revealing a world devoid of the blood sea, though still tinged in blood red. In this blood-colored world stood a towering conical peak. Atop it stood a man. This man's crimson hair fluttered without wind, and his eyes were a bright, violent red, filled with bloodlust and a supreme arrogance that could rival the heavens. No one would even notice his appearance, for under the gaze of his eyes, all attention would be drawn to them. Tuasan. Wang Lin's expression was a mix of emotions. Between him and Tuasan was a web of fate and entanglement. Had Wang Lin never appeared, Tuasan would have already regained all his memories and broken free, roaming the stars in 2C's body. After all, he was 2C. Though it was 2C who failed in cultivating the ink flow soul division art, birthing a demonic thought within him, whether that thought was demonic or not, Tuasan was the true ancient god, the genuine royal ancient god. Compared to Tuasan, Wang Lin's ancient god true body, though forged through the ancient god art, and though it had reached the 5 stars through a series of fortunate events, was ultimately flawed. When his true body prematurely endured the 3 decays and 7 tribulations, Wang Lin had come to understand. His ancient god form was not perfect. As Tuasan raised his head within the vortex and looked at Wang Lin's complicated gaze vanished, replaced by an icy calm. 2 beings, 1 man, 1 god, entwined by fate, stood divided by a swirling vortex, by 2 different worlds, yet their paths crossed in silence. Tuasan's lips curled slightly as he stepped forward. With a single stride, he left the conical mountain and walked atop the vortex, his eyes scanning the surroundings. When Yin Lazy met Tuasan's gaze, his heart involuntarily shuddered. For once, he actually heard the sound of his own heartbeat. Thump, thump, thump. Each beat making his mouth go dry, his face drain of color, and his body instinctively retreat. He didn't even dare to meet Tuasan's eyes. In that moment, the man before him felt like the embodiment of the heavens themselves. Trash. Contempt filled Tuasan's eyes. When his gaze fell upon the 8 kings of the Corpsine sect, that contempt only deepened. Trash, at the very least, are still human. You lot aren't even worthy of being called trash. Though the 8 kings held supreme status within the Corpsine sect, under Tuasan's gaze they paled even more than Yin Lazy. One by one, they stepped back, their faces ghostly white, as if that stare could tear their very souls apart. It felt as though, with one flash of anger, this man could make all of heaven and earth yield. They had never witnessed Tuasan's power firsthand. Yet for some unknown reason, just the sight of him struck fear into their hearts. The feeling was subtle, but unmistakably real. Because Tuasan was a god, an 8-star ancient god. And they were merely mortals, mere cultivators. Royal, ancient god soul, murmured an elderly man in black, his expression calm. Tuasan turned his gaze toward him, his expression unchanged. Coldly, he said, "At least one of you isn't trash." The old man didn't take offense. He simply smiled faintly, raised his right hand, and pointed forward. Instantly, the space between him and Tuasan collapsed with a thunderous roar. From that collapse surged endless void, forming an invisible storm that surged straight toward Tuasan. In the face of that assault, Tuasan raised his right hand and punched forward. Heaven and earth trembled. The void shook violently. From every direction, shattered nirvana cultivators began to arrive. From afar, they saw that punch, and their faces immediately twisted with fear and panic. Wang Lin turned pale. He could feel the overwhelming force behind that single punch. As the punch landed, the trembling of the void reached its peak. A colossal crack suddenly tore through the space between Tuasan and the black-robed elder. The screeching sound of the rupture pierced the air as the fissure expanded with a deafening roar. In an instant, the void was split in two. It was like a sheet of paper being ripped down the middle, dividing everything. The rift tore apart the space Tuasan stood in, splitting it into 2 worlds. The black-robed elder took a single step forward and vanished. When he reappeared, he was already on the other side of the void. With no need for hand seals, he simply waved his sleeve, and a thunderous rumble erupted. Countless glacial peaks materialized out of thin air, rapidly spreading across a radius of 10,000 miles. 10,000 miles, instantly frozen over. The countless icy mountains collapsed and surged toward Tua's senior, petty divine arts. Even if you've reached void nirvana and grasped the rules, so what? A mad arrogance lit up Tua Sen's eyes. Laughing wildly, he hurled another punch forward. My ancient god clan doesn't cultivate the rules. Because the rules are what we were born to shatter. His punch fell, and cracking sounds echoed through the frozen world. Rifts instantly appeared across it all. Every charging ice peak, every stretch of glacial ground, shattered in that moment, crushed by a single blow. The black-robed elder flickered backward, his face solemn. The shattered ice surged into the sky as a storm, but amid the chaos, Tua Sen's body slowly rose upward. Bear witness to the power of my clan, he declared, not to the elder, but to Wang Lin. In that instant, his crimson-haired form began to fade, slowly vanishing into the void. At the same time, the void trembled once again, and cracks exploded one after another, as if a brutal force was filling the space, attempting to tear the void apart. In the sky above, a massive vortex suddenly appeared where Tua's sun had vanished. The vortex emitted a powerful pulling force. The old man in black remained calm as he stepped into the vortex. Follow me. What's coming next is the true power of this ancient dark god. The old man's voice echoed. Without hesitation, Wang Lin stepped into the vortex. His expression was complex, vaguely sensing that this vortex led to a spatial rift outside 2C's physical body. In the space rift where 2C's body was stored, a colossal figure, as large as several cultivation stars, stirred. His finger moved slightly, and slowly, he clenched his fist. On his rough face, his eternally closed eyes, which had remained shut since the moment they closed countless years ago, finally opened for the first time. His eyes, as calm as a dead sea, exuded the passage of time. His coarse skin resembled the cracked earth of a desolate star. He silently gazed at the sky, and his giant face began to distort into a ferocious grimace. Above his forehead were 8 dim ancient god-star dots. But now, as the giant's eyes opened and he awoke from his eternal slumber, the first ancient god star began to emit a faint glow. A thunderous rumble suddenly spread throughout the entire spatial rift, a sound far surpassing any thunder. Yet, if one listened carefully, they could hear a sound resembling bones grinding against each other, colliding. This ancient god, whose body could rival multiple cultivation stars, slowly sat up. The distance from lying down to sitting up was so vast that any cultivator who couldn't use the shrinking earth technique would need hours of flight to cover it. Wang Lin stared at the immense ancient god before him. The instant the giant stood up, a storm swept across, pushing him and the others backward. Only the old man in black stood firm, his gaze locked with an eerie gleam, watching ahead. Compared to this ancient god, the cultivators here seemed no larger than ants, dwarfed in every possible way. I am the ancient god, Tua-san. A booming voice resonated through the space. At the sound, large cracks appeared in the surrounding space rift. The 8 kings of the Corpsine sect turned pale, trying to retreat. But before this enormous ancient god, there was no retreat, no distance to be gained. This is a god. Yin Lazy's face grew even paler as he stared blankly at the unimaginable figure of the ancient god. With his cultivation, he rarely felt such a sense of helplessness. Wang Lin, the weakest among them, did not bleed at the echoing sound, but his body cracked with a series of sickening sounds. One crack across his chest stretched through his body, and his complexion darkened to a deep iron black, a sign of a heavily wounded essence spirit. His physical body was on the verge of turning to stone. Some of the shattered Nirvana cultivators who had entered the spatial rift with him, though few in number, stood stunned, unable to move. With their cultivation and composure, they could remain unshaken under the influence of the laws of time, but what they saw now almost shattered their minds. The voice alone sent their essence spirits into chaos, like thunder exploding in their ears, the echoes reverberating endlessly. The ancient god, now sitting up, grew colder. The second ancient god star on his forehead began to shine with a glimmer. If one looked closely, they could faintly sense something unusual within the shining star. Looking at the floating cultivators before him, he raised his right hand as if swatting away a fly. His arm, as massive as a cultivation star, swept through the air, creating a violent wind and unleashing an overwhelming force that none could resist. In the face of the ancient god, the distance between stars seemed non-existent. The moment his right arm was raised, to the moment it swept down, only an instant passed. Yet, to the cultivators around, that instant erased everything in their view. Boom, boom, boom. The deafening roar echoed in the distance before it even reached their ears. The enormous ancient god's arm was already closing in, its speed indescribable. A shattered nirvana cultivator at the front could not escape. He hastily formed hand seals and gathered his full cultivation power. Layers of divine defense appeared around him, stacking until over 10,000 layers of protective light appeared. He tried to retreat, attempting to counter the godlike arm with his defenses, though he knew it would cost him greatly. The arm crashed down, colliding with the protective light layers, and despite the thousands of defenses, they crumbled like paper before the might of the ancient god's arm. With a loud bang, the tens of thousands of protective light layers surrounding the cultivator collapsed, the outermost layer and the innermost layer shattering at the same time. In reality, their collapse had a slight difference in timing, but it was almost imperceptible because that enormous arm didn't pause for even a moment. It simply swept through with a single motion. As the light layers shattered, the cultivator, who had spent over 10,000 years cultivating and had barely reached the early shattered nirvana stage, let out a bitter laugh before his body exploded into a spray of blood, as if blooming upon the arm of the ancient god. His essence spirit dissipated along with his body, transforming into a ball of heaven and earth energy, which was sucked into the rough cracks on the ancient god's arm. Just as the ancient god's arm continued to swing without any pause, the elderly man in black suddenly had his eyes flash with an eerie light. He stepped forward, crossing an immense distance, and appeared before the sweeping arm of the ancient god. In comparison to that gigantic arm, the elderly man's body seemed insignificant, so small it could easily be ignored. Yet, the old man remained calm, raising his right hand and slapping forward. With a thunderous sound, it was as if countless heavenly thunderbolts erupted between the old man and the ancient god's arm, transforming into a storm of terrifying lightning. The arm, which had seemed to swing endlessly without pause, halted just before the old man, its hand meeting his palm. At that moment, the gale caught up with the speed of the ancient god's arm, blowing against the old man. This wind could topple mountains, scatter flesh, and shatter souls, but at that moment, it merely lifted the old man's hair, and a ribbon tied to his pale white strand snapped in the middle with a loud crack, fluttering backward. The old man, in his black robes, was also blown backward, with his sleeves rustling. 7 cracks appeared on his sleeves, and as his hem fluttered, it turned to ash and vanished into the world. The skin on his right palm, where it had made contact with the ancient god's arm, trembled. It was as though waves were rippling beneath his skin, spreading through his arm and into his body. The ripples extended all the way down his sleeve, and several more cracks appeared. In the end, the sleeve tore off, floating backward as a cloud of ash. The old man looked up, his eyes gleaming with sharp light. His complexion, which had turned red for a moment, paled again, but his eyes remained bright like the moon, with a faint glimmer of battle intent. After taking 7 steps back, the old man suddenly raised his head. In one swift motion, he leaped forward, reaching the arm of the ancient god in a single step. Using the momentum, he launched himself like a shooting star straight toward Tuasen's face. Tuasen's eyes remained cold, showing a contemptuous and arrogant look. With a flick of his right hand, the barely noticeable handprint on his arm instantly shattered. With a thunderous roar, his massive body slowly rose. As he stood, he seemed to pierce the sky, exuding an overwhelming aura, as if the very will of the heavens had descended upon the world. especially the third star point that appeared on Tuo Sen's forehead. After the first 2 points lit up, this third one gradually brightened, though something seemed hidden deep within it, something invisible, something unfathomable. Wang Lin stared blankly at Tuo Sen before him, especially at that distant star point on Tuo Sen's forehead. Shock spread in his heart. In his memory, he knew the name of a royal 8-star ancient god's divine ability. However, he had no memory of its specific application methods. Annihilation of stars. Trash. The buzzing voice reverberated. Tuo Sen waved his hands, and a violent gale surged toward the elderly man. Its speed was so fast, it was as if the earth itself had been contracted. In the blink of an eye, Tuo Sen was on either side of the old man. His two arms, like two massive cultivation stars, slammed toward the old man with devastating force. The old man's face flushed red once more. His clothes puffed up, and with a shout, boundless heaven and earth energy suddenly gathered. The old man's arms extended outward, and in an instant, the world seemed to transform. Ice rivers appeared around his arms, followed by a sea of fire, then countless mountains, and beyond those mountains, a storm of thunder. Layers upon layers of divine abilities suddenly appeared. As the elder extended his arms, they attacked the ancient god's arm that was charging toward him. In an instant, the spatial rift trembled violently, with booming sounds echoing continuously. From a distance, it seemed as though countless fireworks were constantly bursting from Tuo Sen's arms. However, these divine abilities only caused Tuo Sen's arm to hesitate for a moment. But for the elderly figure in black, this brief moment was enough for his body to break free from Tuo Sen's arms and, stepping through the void, head straight for his head. Wu Jizi, if you don't show yourself now, don't blame me for breaking my promise. Are you hiding here? Have you forgotten our old agreement? The elder in black shouted as he advanced. Lu Fuzi, I haven't forgotten the agreement, but I'm powerless. You, leave quickly. A voice, full of bitterness and age, slowly echoed from within the spatial rift. Yet, as the fourth star point on Tuo Sen's forehead glowed, becoming brighter and nearing the brilliance of the first 3 star points, the voice gradually weakened until it completely disappeared. The moment the voice vanished, the elder's expression changed drastically. King Lin, in shock, with his knowledge of the ancient gods, had a vague guess. Just as that voice faded, Wu Jizi's voice once again reverberated. This time, it was a furious roar. Leave now. Inside the fourth star on Tuo Sen's forehead, it had been pitch black, with only a vague shape visible. But now, as Tuo Sen awakened, it gradually grew brighter, with glimmering crystal lights flashing, slowly illuminating the surroundings. The middle-aged scholar sitting cross-legged here seemed normal at first glance. But if one looked closely, they would be alarmed to see that his lower half was now fused with the ground, indistinguishable, as if they had grown together. The crystal light that began to shine around wasn't from all directions, but emanated from within the scholar's body. With each glimmer of light that appeared, the scholar's face grew paler, weaker. Now, the crystal light surrounded him, lighting up the entire area. His body, in an instant, withered away, his skin clinging to bone, resembling a skeleton. But he was not dead, nor would he die. He could only silently endure countless years here. Yet, he was unwilling. This unwillingness turned into a struggle, causing his features to contort as he forcefully circulated his cultivation, raising his head to let out a roar. The elder in black contracted his pupils, his expression grave. He immediately retreated, his eyes fixed on the fourth star point on Tuo Sen's forehead. In that brief moment earlier, he had clearly felt Wu Jizi's voice come from there. But strangely, when the elder scanned with his divine sense, he found nothing. Thinking of Wu Jizi's words, the elder's mind stirred, and he retreated without hesitation. You can't escape. Tuo Sen's cold eyes held more disdain, exuding mockery, a look that seemed to view everyone as ants. Extremely arrogant. You will be the 5th ancient star after Wu Jizi. Tuo Sen's voice resonated through the heavens, as he lifted his right foot and stomped forward. But in that instant, the 4th star on his forehead flared with dazzling light. This light was entirely different from the first 3 stars, seeming to be on the verge of collapsing, causing Tuo Sen's raised right foot to hesitate. The elder, who had been retreating, turned around, reaching out with his right hand into the void, and immediately, a broken sword appeared in his hand. The sword was only half complete, but as soon as it appeared, an unimaginable pressure shot up into the sky. The elder bit his tongue, spitting blood onto the broken sword, which he flung toward Tua's senator. The broken sword whistled through the air, carrying a terrifying killing intent and sword energy. Rushing straight toward Tua's senator after a brief pause in Tuasen's movement, he stomped down again with a thunderous crash. But the moment his foot met the sword, he roared, and bloodlight appeared around his right foot. The broken sword had pierced through the ancient god Tuasen's right foot, entering his body. It tore through his right leg and sped toward his face. The sword's speed was far beyond that of a shattered nirvana cultivator. Even in the realm of heavenly decay, it surpassed everything. In the blink of an eye, the sword, carrying bloodlight, pierced through Tuasen's right leg. With another flash, it was near his face, heading straight for the fourth star on his forehead. At this moment, the crystal light within the fourth star flickered even brighter, as if Wu Jizi was attempting to break free. However, just as the broken sword shattered all barriers and neared the fourth star, less than 10 feet away, the third star on Tuasen's forehead also began to shimmer with light. From within the light, someone walked out. The man's body resembled that of a skeleton, with no traces of his original appearance. His hair was disheveled, and his entire body was bare. With a single step, he reached the broken sword beside him. His right hand lifted, and he fiercely squeezed forward. It was difficult to describe the grace of this squeeze. To Wang Lin, the motion seemed as fluid as flowing water, containing some form of celestial law. Even this description felt inadequate, as though the laws of the world themselves shifted with his motion, changing with the person's actions. The sword's momentum suddenly halted. 2 fingers appeared on its blade, and no matter how the broken sword struggled, it couldn't escape from between them. However, the owner of those 2 fingers, the skeleton-like cultivator, also endured tremendous pressure. His entire body trembled with explosive sounds, as if it were about to collapse. His dim eyes erupted with brilliance, and a crescent-shaped mark appeared on his brow, clearly visible to everyone present. With a low growl, he flicked his fingers sharply, and the broken sword's direction changed in an instant, flying upwards at an angle. After completing this, the skeletal figure's chest rose and fell rapidly as he returned to the third star. Wang Lin watched this scene with a bitter expression. The old man in black was even more cautious. His eyes flickered briefly before his right hand swung through the air, causing the broken sword to vanish into nothingness. Without hesitation, the black-robed elder turned to leave, his speed so fast it seemed to tear the fabric of space itself, as if he was about to escape. "You can't escape." Tuasen's eyes glowed with a ghostly light. The 5th star point on his brow dimmed, losing all brilliance. Yet, at that moment, it seemed Tuasen had used some kind of divine power, spinning rapidly, reaching an incredible speed. From afar, it looked like a black hole. It detached from his brow, hurtling directly towards the old man in black. But just as the star point left his brow, a rumbling sound came from Tuasen's 4th star. The crystal light inside exploded outward, forming an obstruction that surrounded the 5th star point that was flying away. "Lu Fuzi, go quickly. I was wrong, so wrong all those years ago. I shouldn't have sought the power of the royal ancient god to break through to the early void nirvana stage. Now, I'm paying the price." Blood spurted from Wu Jizi's mouth, and his body trembled. With his current fusion with the ancient god, he gritted his teeth, preventing the 5th star's devouring force. He knew that if Lu Fuzi were swallowed too, there would be no hope of escape for him in this life. To break free, he had no choice but to risk everything to save Lu Fuzi. Only then could there be a sliver of hope for the future. The black-robed elder didn't hesitate. With one step forward, waves spread before him, forming a vortex. At this moment, Tuasen's eyes gleamed coldly, ignoring the obstruction of the 5th star point. He raised his right hand and pulled it back, gripping the vast emptiness in his palm. Purple lightning flickered through the space rift, instantly transforming into a massive spear the length of several planets. The God-slaying spear. This was a true royal ancient god artifact, the God-slaying spear. Gripping the spear, Tuasin's expression turned ferocious. He threw it forward with great force. The god-slaying spear let out an earth-shattering scream as it surged with the mighty power of the ancient god, hurtling toward the black-robed elder. Its speed was so fast that neither the naked eye nor divine sense could track it. In the blink of an eye, the god-slaying spear neared, and as it traveled, the space rifts along its path were continuously destroyed, leaving a trail of afterimages. The black-robed elder's face darkened. Though he could step into the vortex to escape, he knew that under the god-slaying spear, he would be injured. If more time passed, and the fifth star point broke free, he feared he would be left behind. But he didn't have time to think. In a flash, he entered the vortex, forming hand seals. Immediately, the broken sword from earlier appeared before him. He spat more blood, and with a swing, the broken sword sped toward the god-slaying spear. Wang Lin silently watched this scene. He had seen Tuasin's power before, and while he had gained some understanding from Tu Si's memories, seeing it firsthand was entirely different. He watched the god-slaying spear howling toward him. To others, it seemed like divine judgment, capable of harvesting all life. But to Wang Lin, the god-slaying spear was just a magical artifact. The broken sword howled as it collided with the god-slaying spear. Though the sword's size couldn't compare to the spear's, its momentum was not far behind. At the moment of collision, though the broken sword was invisible, the god-slaying spear momentarily faltered. A thunderous roar echoed as the broken sword was instantly sent spiraling away, vanishing into nothingness. The god-slaying spear vibrated violently, emitting a booming sound like thunder, but after a brief pause, it continued its assault. Wang Lin's only thought now was to prevent the black-robed elder from being devoured by Tuasin's star points. At the moment the god-slaying spear halted, he didn't hesitate. His body shot forward, reaching the massive god-slaying spear in an instant. His actions made the old man in black narrow his eyes, caused Yin Lazy to be stunned, and shocked all 8 kings of the Corpsine sect as they turned to look. Wang Lin closed his eyes. At the moment the divine destruction spear approached, his body suddenly collapsed with a thunderous explosion, scattering into pieces of rock. Yet, at the moment of his imminent destruction, his essence spirit formed a seal and released a divine thought aimed directly at the spear. With my will, Wang Lin, I block your path. The divine destruction spear trembled briefly, but a brutal aura immediately emanated from it, representing Tuasin's divine thought. It collided with Wang Lin's fragile essence spirit and instantly shattered it with a thunderous sound. The first ancient god star, I will keep it for you. These were the last words Wang Lin heard before his essence spirit was destroyed. Without Wang Lin's obstruction, the divine destruction spear howled through the air. However, the brief hesitation and tremor it experienced gave the old man in black enough time. He vanished into the vortex, followed by Yin Lazy and the 8 kings of the Corpsine sect, all of whom rushed into the vortex and disappeared. The divine destruction spear shrieked as it struck the vortex. A tremendous force tore into it, causing an earth-shattering echo. As Yin Lazy stepped out from the vortex, he was immediately struck by this force. Blood sprayed from his mouth, and his body immediately crumpled. His legs exploded into blood mist. This force surged into his essence spirit, causing it to become unstable. With a bitter smile, Yin Lazy's eyes revealed deep hatred. He hated Tuasin, second only to Zhong Xuanzi from that year. As he saw the overwhelming force surge again, Yin Lazy's eyes became manic, and he was about to abandon his physical body and self-destruct, hoping to escape with his essence spirit. At that moment, the old man in black appeared beside Yin Lazy, grabbing him and vanishing without a trace. The 8 kings of the Corpsine sect barely escaped the vortex. But as soon as they did, the incredible force came again. Their bodies trembled simultaneously, exploding into pieces, turning into 8 cold auras that formed illusions and attempted to flee. However, under the pressure of that immense power, 5 of them disintegrated instantly. The remaining 3 finally took out their coffins and rushed into them, occupying their bodies once more to flee. But as the overwhelming force crashed toward them, their bodies disintegrated again. This cycle repeated, and the distance of less than 1,000 feet felt like the end of the world. Blood mist erupted, and another died. The remaining 2 kings of the Corpsine sect were nearly soul-destroyed. As they fled, they saw the residual force of the devastating power approaching. In their desperation, a ripple of black mist appeared around them. 2 arms reached out from within and grabbed the 2 of them, pulling them toward the vortex. "Master!" The 2 of them showed wild joy in their eyes, offering no resistance as they were pulled into the vortex. At that moment, the residual force of the divine destruction spear arrived, entering the vortex. Inside, a muffled grunt was heard from an injured figure, but it seemed to hold on. Then, the vortex disappeared. Outside Vermilion Bird Star, on Moon Star, within an ordinary mountain peak, Wang Lin opened his eyes. After a brief moment of disorientation, he suddenly stood up, waved his right hand, and stored the silver-clad female corpse into the storage rift. He destroyed the ground formation and took a step forward, shrinking the earth to inches, vanishing without a trace. When he reappeared, he was already in the starry sky, far from Vermilion Bird Star. However, Wang Lin didn't pause for a moment. He continued to dash forward, his face pale with a grim expression. Even someone like him, who had never known fear, was trembling. Tuo Sen's words echoed constantly in his mind. "The first ancient god star, I will keep it for you." Facing Tuo Sen, even if my true body has passed through the 3 decays and 7 tribulations, even with the trident in hand, I am no match for his punch. Wang Lin's face was filled with bitterness. He didn't know if Tuo Sen had escaped, but he understood that he could no longer stay in the Alliance Star domain. He had to leave quickly and never return, unless he gained the power to fight Tuo Sen. With this bitterness, his figure vanished once again. Shrinking the earth to inches, he appeared on a desolate and abandoned star, the path he had previously prepared for himself. There, he had set up a formation before visiting the Vermilion Bird Sacred Emperor at the Four Saints sect. Volume 9, Summit of the Cloud Sea. This day was a significant festival on this star. The origins of this festival had long since faded into the depths of history and were forgotten by most. However, the customs had unknowingly been passed down and had become a habit. Households lit lamps in the snowstorm, and it seemed that everywhere people lived, laughter could be heard. It was night, but with the light of the lamps and the falling snowflakes, although it could not compare to daylight, the silver glow was still clearly visible. In the snow, a young man silently walked forward, leaving a trail of footprints on the ground. However, the footprints were shallow, soon covered by the falling snowflakes, gradually fading away, erasing all traces. This young man wore white robes, and even his hair was white. Snowflakes landed on his hair. From a distance, it was hard to distinguish between the snow and his hair. The wailing cold wind stirred, gently lifting the snow on the ground, as if trying to merge with the snow in the sky, only for it to fall again, indistinguishable from the old snow. The young man walked quietly through the rising snow, his steps muffled on the thick snow beneath him, producing faint creaking sounds. Yet, in the harsh wind, those sounds were blown away, lost among the falling snowflakes. In this cold winter, his white robe was thin, barely enough to keep out the chill, and his shoes were similarly thin. Yet, he seemed unbothered by the cold, silently facing the wind and snow, carrying within him a sense of melancholy and the bitterness of having to leave. He moved forward, step by step, toward the distant plains, his pace slow but resolute. The sharp northern wind, laden with cold and snow, seemed to want to halt the young man's journey, attempting to keep him from leaving home on this festive day. But it was powerless as it battered against him, dissipating without strength. In the dark night, amidst the wind and snow, there were no signs of life around him, only the sound of the wind and the snowflakes bidding him farewell. How much time passed, he did not know, but the young man's footsteps finally stopped. He stood in a place where, in all directions, the ground appeared flat and uninterrupted, covered entirely by a blanket of silver snow. "This is the place," Wang Lin said softly, raising his head and calmly gazing at the dim sky. The falling snowflakes scattered before his eyes, covering the earth. Shaking his head to brush off the snow from his hair, Wang Lin exhaled deeply, a mist forming before him and gradually dissipating. He lightly pressed his right foot into the ground, and instantly, a tremor spread from all directions. In a moment, The snow within 1,000 yards around him was swept into a silent storm, swirling upward into the sky, where the wind carried it far away. With the snow gone, the vast land revealed a grand formation beneath the snow. This formation was intricate, with fragments of stone scattered on it, pressing down in several places. After a brief silence, Wang Lin sighed and walked to the center of the formation. With a flick of his right hand, a crack appeared in the air before him, shimmering with a faint glow. With his mind focused, he summoned the stones he'd gathered along the way. They flew out one by one, spinning in the air, hundreds of them, densely packed. With another wave of his right hand, the stones fell into place, scattered around the formation. Suddenly, the formation glowed with brilliance, beginning to operate, showing signs of activation. As the formation came to life, the snowflakes falling from the sky were immediately pushed upward by the formation's power, soaring into the air and scattering in all directions. Sitting cross-legged in silence on the ground, Wang Lin reached into the crack in the air and pulled out a soul essence. The soul essence's eyes were tightly shut, unconscious. Holding the soul essence, Wang Lin quickly formed seals with his left hand and tapped on it several times. Each tap caused the soul essence to tremble until, with a final flick of his right hand, the soul essence shot into the air, its intangible form stretching and twisting as it spiraled into a vortex. The vortex howled, accompanied by the sound of mournful wails. At that moment, the formation beneath the ground was fully activated. The sounds of booming resonated through the air, replacing the wind, creating an intense light. Rather than surging into the sky, all the energy was drawn into the vortex above. With each booming sound, the vortex seemed to open further. Wang Lin opened his eyes, raised his hands in a seal, and calmly spoke, "Guide with the soul." In an instant, bloodlight flickered within the vortex. As the formation's light merged with it, the ground below Wang Lin cracked, crumbling into pieces, the stones turning to ash. The vortex in midair ceased its spinning, its light flickering as darkness engulfed it, resembling a passageway. Rising to his feet, Wang Lin stepped forward, entering the vortex. Before he stepped in, he cast one last glance at the silver earth. Though this place was unfamiliar, the air he breathed was that of the Alliance star domain. It felt like home, filled with the scent of friends, his reluctance, and his stories. Once I leave, I do not know when I will return. Perhaps I may never return. But at least, I leave with snow to send me off, and the wind to accompany me. That is enough. Wang Lin bitterly retracted his gaze, letting out a long laugh as he walked deeper into the vortex, gradually disappearing from sight. On the abandoned star's plains, the vortex vanished as well. Only the lingering echoes of his laughter spread out, slowly muffled by the snowflakes, blending with the earth and sky. The vast 1,000-yard expanse of the plains, too, began to be filled by the snowflakes, as though the footprints of Wang Lin's journey had vanished, leaving no trace behind. The four great immortal realms, Thunder Realm, Rain Realm Alliance, and others each had their own star domains. The Rain Realm Alliance, with its cultivation nations ranked from 1 to 9, stood unique. Thunder Realm Luo Tian, with its ancient and primordial cultivation families, created different cultivation paths and focused on varying directions of cultivation. Even the cultivators from these realms had vastly different personalities. Compared to the strictness of the Alliance, Luo Tian is more about freedom. However, this freedom can be entirely forsaken when it comes to family honor. Glory surpasses everything. The Wind Realm Cloud Sea is vastly different from the Rain and Thunder Realms. The Cloud Sea star domain spans a larger area than the Luo Tian star domain. In fact, it can be said that among the four great immortal realms, the Cloud Sea occupies the most expansive star domain. Looking up at the starry sky, it isn't a pitch-black void, but rather shrouded by a thin layer of star mist. This mist permeates most of the Cloud Sea star domain, and one's divine sense is somewhat hindered within it. Due to the star mist, which has existed eternally like the passage of time, the Cloud Sea star domain appears not as a starry sky, but a sea of fog. This is also the origin of the Cloud Sea's name. In the Cloud Sea star domain, due to its unique mist, even great divine ability cultivators, without an accurate star map, will lose their way if they venture too far into the star domain, forever trapped within it. Even the shrinking Earth technique is severely disrupted under this mist. Though it still has some effect, it is not as effective as usual. No one knows the origin of this mist, but it is said to have existed since the ancient immortal domain, long before the Cloud Sea ever emerged. Unlike the four great domains in the southeast and southwest of Luotian and the Alliance, the Cloud Sea has no distinct cardinal directions. The mist makes it incredibly difficult for cultivators to clearly discern their position. Similarly, the system within the Cloud Sea doesn't allow for directions to be assigned. Instead, due to varying mist densities, the area is divided into 9 tiers, with the first tier being the outermost and the 9th tier at the innermost. Moro continent lies within the 5th tier of the Cloud Sea. Amidst the dense star mist, Moro continent appears hazy from afar. At its center stands a towering black pagoda that emits a soft light, enveloping the entire continent. This light prevents the star mist from infiltrating the continent and disperses it to some extent, creating a rare clarity around the land. Though the Cloud Sea star domain doesn't lack cultivation stars, their numbers are extremely sparse. Most are concentrated in the higher tiers, 7 and above, totaling fewer than 100 stars. The most common sight in star domains below the 7th tier are the floating continents, each representing a sect within the Cloud Sea. To the north of Moro continent, rain pours incessantly from the night sky, covering the land like a torrential downpour. The ground is a muddy swamp, with dense tree leaves bent under the weight of the rain, as if unable to raise their backs under the pressure. The rain runs in streams from the edges of the leaves, pouring down to the earth. Small beasts hide in the corners, trembling in the downpour. Occasionally, brightly colored snakes dart through the muddy water, playing in the rain, a perfect feeding time for them. This is a jungle, where only the sounds of rain and the rustling of leaves fill the air. Otherwise, it's eerily silent. Occasionally, lightning flashes across the sky, briefly illuminating the earth beneath. Deep in the jungle lies a clearing, about 100 feet across, where people had once cleared the land to set up a formation. The rain has washed away some of the dirt, making the formation clearer. There are no cultivators around. The last group of guards who had been waiting by the formation left 3 months ago, abandoning the formation but leaving it intact, seemingly still clinging to a glimmer of hope. As lightning strikes again, the ground is momentarily illuminated. Inside the formation, a cracking sound suddenly rings out, but under the thunder's roar, the noise is drowned out. Blue light illuminates the formation, gradually enveloping it. At that moment, the rain falls faster, as if the heavens themselves sense the arrival of a cultivator from outside the Cloud Sea, one who will rise and shake the 4 great immortal realms. The rain grows heavier, and the thunder intensifies,